Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you holding this important hearing today. With the average price of gasoline nationwide currently sitting at $3.35, and the average hard rock mining project taking 7 to 10 years to go through the NEPA permitting process, clearly we must do more to streamline the permitting process and encourage responsible energy production. And I must just add that I'm not thrilled to hear the remarks from Mr. Squillace, excuse me, and the ranking member. It's coming, whether people like it or not. The Green New Deal, wind, solar, it's coming, whether people like it or not. We're not even going to allow the markets to decide. The markets were deciding with fossil fuels, and it was a reliable and efficient energy source, and then the federal government came in and shut them down and heavily subsidized wind and solar, so-called renewables that are not renewable. And now we hear it's coming whether people like it or not. You're going to learn to like it because the federal government is going to put the restrictions and regulations to force you to have it, and you're going to like it whether you whether you want to or not. Praise the Lord. Look, I'm proud to support both of these well-crafted bills that we're here to discuss today that will do the work that's needed to streamline the permitting process and encourage responsible energy production here in America. I'm also thrilled that the TAP American Energy Act also includes the American Energy Act that I introduced. My bill, H.R. 1067, is important to the people in my district and will help reduce gas prices by providing certainty for energy producers. Now, Chief Operating Officer Knotts, you talk about this in your testimony, but the Biden administration continues to ignore the leasing mandates in the Mineral Leasing Act and the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act. Will this bill force the administration and future administrations to comply with the law?
Well, it certainly should. Again, thank you for the question. As I said earlier, the laws are there, but the Biden administration has not enforced the Mineral Leasing Act and OXLA. This bill will require quarterly lease sales, which is very important to get that process both onshore and offshore. And I just want to also stress again how important or how negative the president has been. I can't tell you the impact that the administration is saying no more drilling on federal lands, no more drilling offshore. The president saying again, no ability for the oil industry to provide, to continue to drill, period.
He wants to end fossil fuels.
Has a dampening effect. Has a dampening effect on small producers that we represent to get out there and operate. And one other thing I would say is you're talking about the energy renaissance that happened with hydraulic fracturing. Nobody knew that. So if you're talking about we know what's going to happen, we know the market decided that. Energy producers, independent producers, took huge risks to go down, hydraulically frack, horizontal, and the energy renaissance has happened. Thank God that happened. Thank God that now that we have a situation in Ukraine and elsewhere that people didn't say, oh, we're done. Our producers, American producers, went out and said, we're going to take the risk, small producers, and that's benefited all of us.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Knotts. Now, it was reported yesterday that President Biden was incorrect about his assertions that the industry is sitting on 9,000 drilling permits, according to the BLM. In reality, those numbers are much lower, potentially due to a clerical error, how convenient, or computer system malfunction. Now, Mr. Knotts, you explain will you explain to those in this subcommittee who have echoed those same remarks that Joe Biden said, that the revised number means, what the revised number means, and why the industry might not be able to use a permit immediately upon receipt?
So the numbers were, again, as we talked about 9,000, were by the agency's own admission reduced down to 6,600. Again, that will tell you how unclear the agency is on what's happening. The President of the United States himself used the 9,000 figure,
Correct.
which was wrong. Second of all, many of those approved permits are tied up in litigation, lawsuits from the environmental community, both in New Mexico and Wyoming. Leases are tied up. So as you're talking about leasing, it's really important to understand the tied up in litigation. And then finally, it's not just a spigot that you open up. Once you get a permit, it takes a huge amount of work. This doesn't happen overnight. So we certainly take exception to this idea that you can just turn these projects on and off overnight.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Knotts. My time has expired, and thank you to the witnesses who are here today.
Thank the gentleman from Colorado. The gentleman from Montana is recognized. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. My friends across the aisle, when we talk about the cost of energy, choose to ignore the impacts of supply and demand and our domestic production being intentionally reduced by nearly 2 million barrels a day at the very offset of the Biden administration. They never bring up the amazing profits from renewable energy companies, much of which was extracted from taxpayers with no choice in the matter in the form of federal subsidies. It came directly from tax dollars, and not because they actually consumed any energy whatsoever. So I'd just like to list a few of these. Some of the biggest profit margins in the country last year, okay? 2022, we didn't hear about this. All we hear is about the oil and gas. GE, renewable energy, okay? $5.84 billion net profits, 22. Iberdrola, $4.99 billion net profit. Next era, $3.83 billion. Vestas, $1.9 billion net profits. DACO, New Energy, $1.63 billion. Brookfield Renewable, $887 million. These are all net profit numbers. We never hear about that. All we hear about are the oil and gas companies that had major profit margins. But again, my friends across the aisle refuse to acknowledge the facts of supply and demand and this global market. Mr. Knotts, your testimony, you mentioned that while it's a small percentage of all federally owned land, oil and gas development on federal lands results in substantial revenue and investment in those communities that it's produced near. Could you tell me more about the impact of oil and natural gas leases to these rural communities?
Congressman, again, it's hugely important. The revenue source from both onshore and offshore is key to local communities, even throughout the West. The impact on jobs, economic development, schools are so dependent on this mineral revenue, which is a great resource. So, again, we feel that our industry is reducing its footprint, doing a much better job of addressing issues. At the same time that the footprint's getting smaller, we're producing more oil and natural gas from single well pads. And so the impact on the land, the impact on environment's reduced. In addition, if you look at any data, CO2 has gone down, methane has gone down, SOx has gone down, NOx has gone down. So this is really a great story that we need to continue to do better, continue to do a better job of. But the impact on that, what I talked about, multiple use, of using those lands for a variety of uses, and I want to stress not just oil and natural gas, a variety of uses is really the backbone of those Western economies.
And this is something that I had spoke with the ranker about just last week, and that is there are so many people that have been lifted out of impoverished conditions, provided cleaner water, energy to their homes because of having access to not only these natural resources, but the revenue that is provided by them. Mm-hmm. Mr. Knotts, you also mentioned in your testimony that no modern economy can function without oil and natural gas production. I understand that you are a petroleum expert, so I hope it's not unfair to ask you a policy question, but energy is a commodity that's based on the global conditions and influences. Given your expertise, do you believe that significantly reducing the number of oil and gas leases in the United States could make us more vulnerable to foreign adversaries?
Absolutely. Again, we talked about the American production being the cleanest barrel of oil that is going to be produced. And that only goes from the environmental benefits, but the labor, the safety. We're very proud of our safety record across the board. If you reduce that, and you saw the administration have to do that, immediately you have to start looking at other countries, Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, which don't produce as cleanly, as safely, and that's going to have a huge impact when you, again, when you significantly reduce the production on federal lands, both onshore and offshore. It's bound to have an impact and causing the United States to have to look abroad at sources that are far dirtier and far less safe.
And outside of the environmental impacts, we've already demonstrated that there's actually more gases in the environment right now than prior to the Biden administration because of these other countries producing the energy at a lower quality environmental standard. What do you believe it does to our national security when we start relying more upon these adversaries for our energy?
It's, again, something we always talk about, which is more than even energy independence, it's energy security. It benefits the world when the United States is an energy superpower, and the renaissance that happened in the oil and natural gas, the shale revolution, really has given us the ability, again, just look at any headline in today's paper, what's happening. Imagine if the United States didn't have a robust oil and natural gas industry to address that, and it's something, again, that we think is really important for energy security.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I yield back.